Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're decoding a really fascinating ancient spiritual mystery, the divine science of liberation. You know, we live in a society that is absolutely obsessed with finding purpose, right? We read all the self-help books, we meditate, we're constantly searching for abstract meaning. But what we're looking at today isn't just everyday abstract philosophy. We're decoding a literal, almost mathematical blueprint for spiritual freedom. This source text completely challenges everything we thought we knew about the afterlife by presenting a highly structured path. So if you've ever wondered about the actual mechanical steps of what happens to the soul, you are in exactly the right place. Let's just dive right in with a cryptic, centuries-old quote that serves as the absolute foundation for this entire text. It says, "Whatever you open on earth will also be open in heaven." Now, for centuries, theologians have debated these exact words. And how do people usually interpret them? Mostly as moral metaphors, like do good deeds here to get a reward later, or maybe some kind of mystical spell. But the text we're examining today strips away all that historical guesswork. It doesn't see this as a metaphor at all. Instead, it takes a breathtakingly literal approach, building its entire rigorous framework around this single powerful idea. Which brings us to this ancient mystery. What's really interesting here is that the text doesn't treat that quote we just talked about as mere magic or folklore. It positions it as the literal, mechanical basis for a highly logical spiritual science. It argues there's an exact, methodical process for how a soul reaches its final destination. And it's absolutely fascinating because it flips our traditional mystical assumptions completely upside down. Instead of just crossing your fingers and hoping for the best based on blind faith, this text turns salvation into a structured, understandable equation that can actually be decoded. So, to decode this, the text zeroes in on the concept of diksha, or initiation, but it completely redefines it. It strips away the whole idea of it being a simple outward ritual or just a basic mental agreement. Instead, it defines initiation as the profound emotional binding of the human heart. Think about the difference between just signing a business contract versus falling deeply, irreversibly in love. A contract is just a mental agreement, right? It's on paper. But falling in love, that alters your entire being. This isn't about attending a ceremony or joining some club. It's about a profound, unbreakable anchoring of your core emotional self to someone else. You're connecting on the deepest possible emotional frequency. So, looking at initiation and the heart's bond, let's see how this builds on our inherent, inescapable need to connect with things. Because understanding this specific type of heart binding is literally the cornerstone of the entire spiritual process we're unpacking today. The crucial point the text makes is that we are constantly attaching our hearts to worldly things every single day. We are naturally, biologically, and psychologically designed to bind ourselves. We bind ourselves to our career goals, dreaming of that next big promotion. We tie ourselves to a 30-year mortgage to secure a house. We attach fiercely to family expectations, to our social status, to the approval of society. It's just what we do. The source points out a really brilliant truth about human nature here. The question isn't whether we're bound. We're connection machines. We're always going to bind to something. The real, life-altering question is, to whom or to what are we actually bound? And that leads us to ask, why is a living guru necessary? This is where we hit a truly revolutionary and honestly somewhat controversial claim made by the text regarding exactly who we need to bind ourselves to for true spiritual liberation. Prepare yourselves, because this logic challenges a lot of deeply held historical beliefs across many different traditions. The text explicitly argues that historical figures from centuries past, no matter how great, how wise, or how universally revered they might be, are actually insufficient for this specific process of earthly binding. To achieve this liberation, it says you absolutely must have a Dedhari Satguru, a living spiritual master who is currently present in a physical, breathing body right in front of you. Now, why isn't a historical figure enough? Well, because you simply cannot emotionally anchor a two-way physical bond to someone who isn't physically there to receive it and reciprocate. Merely having faith in someone who has passed on is beautiful for sure, but the text claims it just isn't enough to forge the active earthly bond required for this specific initiation. And this brilliantly illustrates the central logic of the text. Think about it. For a physical, tangible bond to be successfully forged on earth, remember that opening quote, "Whatever you open on earth," it is 100% necessary for both the binder and the bound to exist simultaneously in the physical realm. It's a non-negotiable scientific requirement, according to this philosophy. Imagine trying to plug a power cord into an electrical outlet that doesn't actually exist in this dimension. It's not going to work, no matter how hard you push. You need two tangible, active points of contact in the exact same dimension to firmly tie a knot and let the current flow. Which brings us to the law of spiritual gravity. Let's dive into the exact mechanics of how this eternal bond actually functions once it's successfully created. What exactly happens behind the scenes after this physical connection with a living guru is made? The text introduces what we can vividly call this law of spiritual gravity. It's a definitive, unyielding rule stating, quite simply, where our heart is, we go. Just like physical gravity pulls an apple down from a branch to the ground with absolute certainty, spiritual gravity dictates that the human soul is magnetically, inevitably pulled toward whatever the heart was most deeply attached to during its time on Earth. There's no escaping this pull. It's treated as a fundamental law of spiritual physics. Whatever you love the most, whatever you tied yourself to, that is exactly where your soul is going to travel. So looking at these two paths side by side, we see a strict cause and effect science at play. On the worldly side, earthly bonds, like tying your heart to material things, financial wealth, societal desires, those inevitably pull you right back to the physical world after you pass. It's basic gravity. The sheer weight of those desires pulls you back down. But on the spiritual side, a bond forged with a living guru acts as a direct, permanent bridge to the Supreme Father. Because the guru is already spiritually connected to the highest source, your bond with them acts like a slingshot. It catapults you straight to that ultimate destination, entirely bypassing the physical world's gravitational pull. Now let's look at the ultimate divine science of liberation. We've arrived at the big twist in this philosophy. We've talked extensively about how this mechanism works and why it requires a physical presence, but who is actually pulling the levers behind the curtain to make this connection happen in the first place? You might logically think the disciple is the one making the active choice to connect and find a guru, right? But the text outlines a shocking three-step divine chain reaction. First, the Supreme Father actually initiates the order from above. Second, acting on that exact divine command, the guru actively connects the disciple. And third, only after those two steps happen, does the soul become entitled to ultimate liberation. This is a massive twist. It completely strips away the human ego from the process of enlightenment. It effectively removes our willpower and control entirely from the equation. It's not about your own intense effort, your intellect, or your searching. It's a precise divine sequence initiated from the very top down. So, knowing that your soul's final destination is dictated by this precise, unyielding spiritual gravity, and knowing that the process involves a living, breathing connection initiated entirely outside of your own control, I want to leave you with a deeply important question to reflect upon. Where is your heart actually bound today? Is it tied to the temporary weights of this world, or is it anchored to something that will pull you upward toward ultimate liberation? Just take a moment to really let that philosophical weight sink in. It's a profound thought to carry with you. Thank you for exploring this fascinating ancient science with me in this explainer.